Now that we're ready to write code, the first thing I'd like to see get going is a way to display our sheet so the user can enter their login information. We have already created an action, show sheet credentials, that can do just this. So let's start working from there. I'm going to come over to this middle bar, and if you double click on it, it'll close that panel. That gives us a little more room to work. So the first thing we'll do is copy this method declaration. So I'll highlight it, copy it, use Command Option up arrow to get to our implementation. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. And we can start writing code. What we want this method to do is show the credentials window as a sheet coming down out of the top of our window. And this method belongs to the NSApplication class. There's a shortcut for that. We can type NSApp, and that is a constant that points to our application. The method we're going to use is called beginSheet, modal for window, modal delegate, didInSelector, context info. Now that's a mouthful, but it does a lot. Xcode has started completing this for me. That's not exactly the method I want, so I'm going to hit the escape key, and it'll bring up a list of all the methods that are within this context that match what I've started typing so far. And the one I want is right at the top. I'm going to arrow up, hit the enter key to select that. Now the sheet that we're going to want to display, we're going to call credentials window. We haven't hooked that up yet to our window, but we will in just a minute. Next, I'm going to go to modal for window, and this is going to be our main window. The modal delegate will set up as nil because we're not going to use this as a delegate method. The didInSelector is going to be nil as well, and the context info is going to be null. Now, just as I did before, I'm going to make this a little more readable by separating each one of these onto their own line. And now that looks better. Now, the way a modal sheet works on a window, when the sheet is invoked, it blocks all interaction with the current window that's open inside of your application. But if you had other windows open inside of your application, those would be available for use. This is referred to as document modal. Now, the way a modal sheet works, when it is executed, it will drop down from the top of the window. The code block that you're in that initialized the sheet to be dropped will continue to run through the end of its execution. This is what the modal delegate and didInSelector are here for. The modal delegate you would normally set to self, and the didInSelector would be another method inside of this class that would get called when that sheet was closed. Now, the way we're going to handle this, we're going to use the buttons that are on the sheet to execute methods themselves. Therefore, we can use nil and nil for the modal delegate and the didInSelector. If we want this to work, we're going to need to set up connections for those windows, the credentials window and the main window. And we start that off by making outlets in our header file. So I'm going to use Command Option up arrow. I'm going to come up to the outlets section, and I'm going to make an outlet for NS window, and I'll call this first one main window, and I'll create another one for the credentials window. Now we need to go over to Interface Builder and connect these up. Looks like I forgot to save the implementation file. We can click on our main controller and choose main window. And we'll do the same thing, control drag to our credentials window and select the credentials window outlet. So at this point, we've written the code and we've connected the windows, the outlets, but we have no way for the sheet to know that it needs to come down. And the easiest way to set that up for our application, I'm going to open up the main menu, and I'm going to choose the Twitter meme, and I'm going to connect this to the preferences, since this is really the only preferences this application will have. So I'm going to control drag from preferences to the main controller, and I'm going to choose Show Sheet Credentials. I'll save that. Go ahead and close the menu. We can go back to Xcode, and let's try this out. So I'll go to the Twitter Me application menu at the top. I'll choose Preferences, and we can see that our window drops down. Now, if we hit the Cancel button or the Submit button, nothing's going to happen because we don't have those methods implemented. and we have no way to close our window. So to close the application at this point, I'm going to have to hit the Close Task button inside of Xcode. Now we need to set up the Obtain Credentials Submit button and Obtain Credentials Cancel button. And I think I'm going to go ahead and copy all of these over right now, just so we can get rid of those compiler warnings. I'm going to use Command Option Up arrow. I'll double click on the side panel. I'm going to come down right below this and just enter in the rest of these. Get rid of the semicolon off the ends. Go ahead and put our braces in. And there we go. Now when we build, no more compiler warnings. Let's go ahead and set up the cancel button first, since that'll be the easiest. Here we're going to tell the NSApp to end the sheet. And the sheet that we want to end is the window of the sender. So we'll say sender window. So in that statement, we're sending a message to NSApp. We're telling it to execute its method end sheet, and we're passing in as a parameter our sender's window. Now our sender is the button. So the window that contains the button is the sender's window. We also need to tell the window to order out. And we do that by saying sender, your window, order out, and then self. So in this statement, we're sending a message to the window, we're telling it to order out, and we're sending our self along as the parameter. And that's all we need to do to cancel the sheet. So let's save this, and then Command R to run, and let's test it out. So if we go to the menu at the top, we select Preferences, the sheet comes down, we hit Cancel, and the sheet goes away. In our next video, we'll set up our Submit button.